And now it's a pleasure and an honor to present to you one of the golden future priests, the great Deacon Tobiah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. And today I'm going to be talking, you may be seated, I'm sorry, you may be seated. Today I'm going to be talking about this knowledge increase in these last days. And there's really two parts of this knowledge being increased in these last days. But I want to start off by saying, a while back when we had started on this, Pastor had called me and he said, we need more information on this. And I said, okay, well, we'll get to work on it. And the next thing he says is, Satan is going to try to stop this from being brought out. And I said, oh, okay. I didn't think twice about it. So we went to work on getting these short video clips together so that y'all could see how the things played out. And, it was getting down to sixth day night. And we had worked most of the day on it. We were working that night, came 11 o'clock. We're trying to get it done. The computer crashes. Lose everything. We start over. We get 3/4 of the way done. The computer crashes. We start over again. And there was a couple other men there with me, and I said, Pastor said this was going to occur. Well, turns out we ended up working on it through most of the night, early enough that we could actually call Pastor the next morning and tell him that we got it done. And he said, well, you're up early. And I said, well, we were up all night trying to finish it. I said, you're right. Satan was going to try to stop it. And she tried, but we didn't let her. Because this knowledge in these last days being increased is prophesied to be done. Now, with that being said, I'd like everyone to turn over to Yada 1, 10 through 11. It's found on page 970. Yada 1, 10 through 11. And I'm going to start off in verse 11. It says, woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and have run greedily in error of Balaam for reward, and have perished in the rebellion of Korah. They've run greedily in the way of Cain. Now I'm going to turn over to Genesis 4:14. Genesis 4:14. And it says, surely you have driven me out from the face of the ground. I shall not be seen by your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. And there shall be continual war, vengeance and retaliation. Everyone very familiar with these scriptures, but I just want to go over them really quick. Daniel 12:4, found on page 684. Daniel 12:4. It says, but you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. And many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. Knowledge will be increased. It didn't say a particular type of knowledge, because there's actually two types of knowledge being increased in these last days. Okay? Now, you don't have to turn here. I'm going to turn over to Deuteronomy 30:19. Really fast. Deuteronomy 30:19. And it says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Life and death, blessings and curses. Okay, I'd like to play the first half of the video. Pay attention very close to the video, please.
At the tender age of 10, went off to war. At first, aircraft was considered to have very little military value except for observation purposes. A spirit of sportsmanship existed between the rival pilots. As they would pass each other on their daily flights over the lines, they would wave a friendly greeting and sometimes take pictures of one another, which led to an unusual development. Sacre bleu! This is outrage! And so, the next day... a hot head as well as a square head, Fritz took a pot shot at Pierre. Duels with pistols, shotguns, and rifles led to the installation of the machine gun. Successful but for one small detail. The propeller got in the way. Then science developed the synchronizing device to allow the bullets to pass between the rapidly revolving blades of the propeller. The airplane became a formidable weapon of war. First round-the-world flight, U.S. Army planes circled the globe. Flying time 15 days, 11 hours. From the mile-a-minute plane of World War I, we are starting today with planes flying more than 6 miles a minute. During the last war, firepower was increased from 1 brick per minute to 2,400 bullets per minute. Today, we're starting with 9,600 bullets per minute. During World War I, aerial grenades and 25-pound hand bombs grew to 2-ton bomb loads. Today, we're starting with 10-ton bomb loads of the most devastating explosives ever conceived by science.
A few years later, at Fort Myer, Virginia, Orville Wright, accompanied by Army Lieutenant Ben Folloy, flew a record 10-mile course, averaging 42 miles per hour and reaching 400 feet altitude. This is the Wright Flyer Kitty Hawk model, for military aircraft number 1. And in the center, Lieutenant Folloy, one of the first officers assigned the mission, learn to fly. The price of safety is eternal vigilance. Swiftly, the vast productivity that symbolized America, our entire resources of government, military, industry, management, machines, money, and skilled manpower were converted to war production. In record-breaking time, this teamwork poured out the weapons of war, especially aircraft. America's outstanding aeronautical contribution culminated in the B-29 Super Fortress, a 4-engine bomber which hastened the end of the war. It could fly farther, faster, and deliver far more destruction and firepower than any other bomber in the sky. As military research and development continued, we produced our Century series of jet fighters. The F-100 was the first jet to break the sound barrier in level flight. Soon there were others even faster, more maneuverable, with greater firepower. The B-58, our first supersonic bomber, presented an entirely new concept in basic aircraft design. Flying at more than twice the speed of sound, it carried more potential destructive power than was dropped on Europe by all Allied aircraft during World War II. While America observed in 1953 its golden anniversary of aviation, science and technology burst into a new power dimension, the thermonuclear age, which gave still greater meaning to air power and set the stage for rapid aerospace development.
There's a lot in that video, and I just want to point out a couple things. I don't know if you noticed, but the technological advances in these planes were, by leaps and bounds. It wasn't, they jumped from 1 mile a minute to 6 miles a minute. That quick. The first round-the-world flight, the U.S. Army. The amount of rounds they were able to fire off these planes. You notice how they made so that they could put machine guns on planes. All that took place. They actually, they would throw ropes out the sides of these planes to try to take down the other plane. They would land on other planes to try to... All these things took place in this generation. This last generation. But also, notice that one of those last planes carries more firepower than all the bombs that were dropped out of airplanes during World War II. That one plane. More firepower. So you can see that it's not getting better. That video was in 1960s. 1960s that video was made. So now, you know, they have stuff way greater than that. But something, you know, that says Iraq war will cost more than World War II. The World War II Iraq will cost more than that. Okay? Here we have a Boeing Dreamliner grounded worldwide on battery checks. This super plane that's supposed to have all these amazing things about it, they can't even get it to run because they're so confused in their minds. They've created these things that now they're going to wipe everyone off the face of the earth with this increase of knowledge, with the nuclear bomb. But there's something I found interesting in the news. This was 1958 plane crash follow-ups. This was in Abelin. Okay? And it says, it all started when a B-47 crashed. The plane carried a nuclear weapon. And there was no dangerous radioactivity unleashed, and there was no atomic explosion. That was 9 years before Pastor came to Abelin. If that bomb would have went off, Satan would have successfully stopped the last day's work of Yahweh. Do you understand how Yahweh protected this work? That was only the second time that had occurred since the creation of the nuclear bomb. And also, 1958, that was just a mere almost 15 years after the nuclear bomb was created. They already had them spread across the nation. Abilene, Georgia, all through the states. So, notice these things, brothers and sisters, when Pastor talks about the knowledge being increased, because it goes a lot deeper than what you just see that the news portrays. You notice the Warplane 1, the Kitty Hawk Flyer. That was actually called Warplane 1, and the third person to learn how to fly it was a U.S. Army lieutenant. So, keep these things in mind. I'm going to start with the next video, and pay very close attention to this video, because this is another big increase of knowledge.
Whitehead says, well, wait a second. If I can make a little compressed air motor, it doesn't have to be very powerful because I package all this in a little package, and in effect he makes a self-guided submarine, right? Because the thing travels underwater. He calls it an automobile torpedo because it runs itself rather than just being pulled. At first it's a very primitive animal. It makes maybe 9 knots, but it has very interesting potential.
The Whitehead torpedo was problematic because it couldn't keep its depth, it didn't steer straight, and it didn't go very far or very fast. And all three of those things had to be settled before it could work effectively. The critical breakthroughs were the gyroscope, which enabled it to keep a steady course, improved depth-keeping systems, basically flotation chambers, and a much improved engine, which provided greater power and longer range. And these things come together by 1905, 1910 to create the weapon that in the First World War will transform the battlefield at sea.
But before that could happen, the torpedo needed better launch capabilities. If it could be launched from submarines instead of the decks of small surface craft, it could become a devastating instrument of war. Did. When the U.S. Navy held a submarine design competition in 1893, Holland's inventive engineering skills produced the clear winner.
That submarine became the Holland V. It was steam-driven. It was 85 feet long. It was 68 tons. It was a big boat.
Britain, the world's superpower, embraced Holland's revolutionary boat. In August 1914, Britain went to war with Germany. The silent service was about to make an explosive debut.
The first and most stunning success for the submarine in the First World War came when the German submarine U-9, commanded by Otto Weddingen, sank 3 large British cruisers off the Dutch coast. They were so surprised by what happened that when the first one was hit and started to go down, the other 2 closed in, stopped, and launched their boats to rescue survivors, and they too in succession were torpedoed and sunk.
This attack was a signal that the weapon of the underdog had finally arrived. It propelled naval warfare into a new era. When Adolf Hitler took control in 1933, he approved plans to once again construct U-boats. 24 were being built by the end of 1935.
The Germans knew exactly what they wanted their submarine. They built their submarines from the very start under Admiral Dönitz from 1935 on for war and war alone.
The U-boat's coordinated use of radio was devastating, but the Allies countered with audio technology of their own. The twin inventions of radar above the waves and sonar beneath. Sonar operators are trained to distinguish the noise of propellers from the ambient sound of the oceans. They can identify and classify other Navy submarines and even their torpedoes. Modern torpedoes can be wire-guided up to 10 miles and are designed not to miss their targets.
Slowly. 2-3, ready in all respects.
But the history of technology shows that every advance in weaponry is quickly countered, especially during war.
In 1943, the Germans are designing a sub that'll run for about 10 hours at 24 knots. Well, you've got to realize that in the past, they're talking about 1 hour for, say, 8 knots. That's a big difference. 24 or 25 knots means that underwater, the submarine can probably outrun most surface ships. And that means that basically the submarine can do what it wants. That's devastating. Over.
Hyman Rickover was a brilliant engineering officer in the United States Navy. He believed that the future of submarines was nuclear.
This chart shows that 1 pound of uranium is equal to 2,600,000 pounds of coal. Here's the pound of uranium, which in comparison is so small that it's represented by a pinpoint.
Here was a fuel that didn't need oxygen for combustion, one that freed the vessel from the surface. By generating its own air and by purifying seawater, the submersible could become a true submarine.
Rickover did one unbelievably important thing. About 48-49, he had a series of design studies for maybe the next step in reactors. And it was very easy to imagine pushing this technology slowly onwards, and maybe eventually you would do something with it, but it wasn't that mature technology. You could keep pushing a lot longer. Rickover said, no, it's mature enough. We're going to go now.
The result was a new age in naval technology, launched by Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. The final stage in the development of the modern submarine was once again about marrying platform and weapon. Missiles were first tested in World War II when German scientists produced the V-1 and V-2 rockets. The Allies realized that missiles would give the submarine a crucial new capability to attack land targets.
Rocket-powered weapons flying at supersonic speeds, destroying unseen targets, are no longer science fiction, but are today a military fact, developed after years of research by Army Ordnance. At war's end, Army Ordnance brought back to America about 100 German rockets and some of the scientists who had built them. In our Army proving grounds, the old German rockets were put to work for research. In them, our military strategists saw the shape of weapons to come.
There she blows!
But then there's ballistic missiles. They're real interesting because it turns out you can fire them while you're submerged. We also discovered that we can build a solid fuel missile that'll fly very long distance, and also we can build very small nuclear warheads. If you put all these things together, suddenly you have this little missile that you can carry in some numbers that's quite devastating. And by the way, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Oh, interesting.
In 1960, the SSBN George Washington, the world's first nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, successfully test-launched 2 Polaris missiles. She was now a silent strike platform, capable of launching nuclear warheads more powerful than all the bombs dropped in World War II.
So you see how the technology increases and continues to increase in these last days. But some of the things we should notice about that is the gyroscopes they were talking about. They couldn't keep these things to go straight. They were kind of just all over the place, and they invented this thing called the gyroscope, and now we use them in everything. Your phone has one in them, GPS, all these things so that it can tell if it's upright, if it's on its side, all these things. But also, sonar and radar were both invented for war. That's it. There was nothing else that they invented it for. It was invented for war and war only. And they made the statement, torpedoes could become a deadly weapon of war, because they're already a deadly weapon of war. But if they get these things to go straight through the water, and if you listen, they said they could be wire guided for up to 10 miles from here to Abelin, and they are designed to not miss their target. They're not going to miss their target at 10 miles away. I'd like everyone to turn over to Romans 1:29. It's found on page 874. And Pastor covered this a couple weeks ago. He says, being filled with unrighteousness, sexual impurities, wickedness, covetousness, maliceness, full of envy and murder, strife, deceit, and malice. And he told us what that word malice means, the desire to cause pain upon another person, cause harm. And, it isn't the fact that they invented the plane. The plane isn't the one that's bringing about this continual war, vengeance, and retaliation. It's this confused mind that would want to bring about malice upon another person. They would want to cause harm to another human being. In the Peace Solution, it talks about all life has value. All life deserves to be respected. So you can see how in these last days, mankind is so confused that they can't even tell that they are going to destroy heaven and earth. They will try to destroy heaven, but they're going to destroy the earth with this increase of knowledge. And you notice how he said, we've got this thing, it's under the water, no one can see it. And he's like, wow, interesting. This is interesting. The United States, Russia had a sub right off the coast of the United States, and they didn't know it for 3 months. They're undetectable. They don't know where they're at, and they can launch those nuclear missiles across continents. They can launch them 3/4 of the way around the world. Pinpoint accuracy, like Pastor said, they can put a missile through a window and assassinate someone. This is this great knowledge, this great increase of knowledge that was prophesied. Now, I'd like everyone to turn over to Isaiah 24:6. It's found on page 544. Isaiah 24:6. And it says, because of this, the curse has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate, and the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. So we can see that it's prophesied, it's going to take place. You also have Matthew 24:29. But I want to get into one thing really quick. This wisdom, this other wisdom, this great wisdom that we're all here learning here in the House of Yahweh, this increase of knowledge in these last days pertaining to the House of Yahweh and the people that are going to put an end to the other increase of knowledge, the increase of knowledge in warfare and how to kill your brother and how to cause malice, all these things. I'd like you to turn over to Isaiah 42. It's just a few pages over. 42:1. Isaiah 42:1. And it says, behold, my servant, whom I uphold, my elect one, whom my soul delights. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will bring forth judgment to the Gentiles, nations. Now, I'd like to read to you really quick the definition of knowledge. It says, the fact or state of knowing or understanding. So you know something or you understand something. Understanding of information one has learned. Okay? Now, this judgment, okay? If you look up wisdom, it says having great judgment and understanding. So you have judgment and understanding, and you are informed. Okay? Recently, Pastor talked about this increase of knowledge. He said, the world has a great understanding of knowledge, but little wisdom. Little wisdom. And that has to do with the laws of Yahweh. But, I have news articles here. If your kids are awake, they're probably online. How TV affects your children. All these things. They're on the computer, these phones, all these things day in, day out, when they wake up, when they go to bed. And they're taking all these things in, this malice, this way of how to harm your brother or your neighbor. I'd like everyone to turn over to Isaiah 45:4. This is another scripture just backing up the other one. It says, Isaiah 45:4. For Jacob, my servant's sake, and Yisrayl, whom I have chosen, I will call you by your name, Jacob, and surname you, Yisrayl, through you did not recognize that it was me. And also, Matthew 12:18, Matthew 10:16, you can turn over there. Matthew 10:16, it's found on page 736. Behold, you will be sent out in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be as wise as serpent and harmless as doves. Would you consider being sent out into this war-raging nations, being sent out to be in the midst of wolves? They're tearing each other apart. Real quick, I just want to point out some of this knowledge here in the House of Yahweh in these last days. We have this knowledge right here. The House of Yahweh established. Which day is this Sabbath? The newest newsletter. All these prophetic words. You can't even carry them all up here. The peaceful solution. The 12th book of Israel. All the books of Israel. These are increase of knowledge, and I want to point out to everyone that the United States is spending $3,000 per second in the war in Iraq. We could buy 250 $12 peace solution books, teacher's manuals, every second. 1,000 every 4 seconds. In 1 year, everyone in the world would have a book. Praise God. This is what we could do with this increase of knowledge. Since the Revolutionary War, this is the number that the United States has spent on the war, why it was taking place, not allied forces, not all this other stuff. This is not the maintenance of the military. This is just when they were in war. They have spent $23.5 trillion. $23.5 trillion. I sat down and a pen and paper and I went and I was like, how many zeros is a trillion? It's almost, you can't even figure it. We had to call on some people that knew their math really well to figure this out because it's amazing how much money they have spent. Now, if you break that down, that's a little over $3,000 per person in the world. With $3,000, we could buy every person in the world 2 sets of every House of Yahweh publication that has ever been brought out. 2 sets. With that money. Every person, man, woman, child, everyone. So, just notice that, there is room for peace. They don't want peace. They want to go and continual war, vengeance, and retaliation, just as Yahweh has Cain said in the beginning. Real quick, I'd like everyone to turn over to Matthew 24:34. Matthew 24:34. It says, truly I say to you, that generation will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. All these things are going to be fulfilled, brothers and sisters, and there's much more going to be brought out on this. And, continue to listen to Pastor. Get that latest prophetic word, brothers and sisters, because it's great. He's got a lot of great wisdom in there. Wisdom, true wisdom, the judgments of Yahweh. Let's learn them. Let's learn how to be these righteous teachers in the house of Yahweh that will put an end to this wicked increase of knowledge that is going to bring an end to 4/5 of the population on this earth. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the great Khan Zephaniah Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We have a lot of news today. In fact, it's getting to the point where there's so much news that's fulfilling prophecy that I'm almost wondering if the whole services is going to be news someday. I know not. Of course, we need the servants, but it's getting very difficult to fit this all in. They had a prosecutor in Texas was murdered, and they don't even know who did it. They don't even know how many people did it, unless they've recently found out in the last day or so, and I missed it. But they don't even have suspects yet, and this is how everyone is vulnerable to this, to being actually murdered in this life today, right now in this world. There was a woman who sang at Obama's inauguration, 16-year-old girl. She was murdered in Chicago for no reason. They thought she was a member of a gang, which she wasn't. And then Rahm Emanuel speaks about that. And I noticed when I saw Rahm Emanuel speaking, I thought there's something different about him. And it turns out there may be, but maybe we'll find that out in the future. But see if you notice it yourself. And then there was a lawyer that was shot and killed in Phoenix during a mediation. And then there was a child, a man took a school bus, tried to take the children out of the school bus. The school bus driver tried to protect the children. He killed the school bus driver, took the 6-year-old down into a bunker that's 6 feet by 8 feet underground, and he's with that child talking through a PVC pipe to the police, and the child's crying for his mother. You know, this is a terrifying situation, and this is you know, kind of along the lines of this increase in knowledge. Even the crimes are getting scarier because of the different techniques they're using, that they're learning even through the internet to terrify people. And then it talks about the norovirus, which is something that this man speaks about how it takes 1,000 viruses normally to catch the cold or the flu, but with the norovirus it only takes 18, and they stay alive 2 weeks on a banister of a railing. So if you go into a store and you touch a railing that someone touched 2 weeks ago, you can get this virus. And then we had a tornado in the middle of the winter that killed a couple people and picked up trucks. And then we have, this is really great, the father of a 6-year-old that was killed at Sandy Hook, and he's speaking before Congress, and he's talking about the need for character cultivation. But what's really interesting about this is he too seems to be affected by something, a message maybe that's out there. And then we have the U.S. Embassy in Turkey was attacked, which is an attack on the U.S. soil itself. And then we have North Korea targeting the U.S. for nuclear attack. They're going to actually target us with a nuclear weapon. So these are all prophecies being fulfilled. So let's play the video.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Katan, we have a lot of news articles to discuss today with our viewers, but first we're going to go directly to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has 3 of the most recent shootings that he's covering, and we know that still this is only a fraction of the shootings taking place across the country at this time. Right. Larry, what do you have for us?
The momentum of malice is continuing, Jeff, and no category of people seems to be untouched. As with star prosecutors who were once considered off limits, so with children who were once considered innocent. And as with the innocent children, so with the lawyers who often persecute the innocent. This week, 3 tragic stories demonstrating exactly that fact. For our first, a veteran prosecutor, Mark Hassey, was on his way to work this week when he was approached by masked gunmen and shot down outside of the Kaufman County Courthouse, located just southeast of Dallas. The motive at this point is uncertain, but investigators are looking at Hassie's cases, which have included drug dealers and organized crime. Murders of prosecutors are very rare in the U.S., but as a sign of the worsening times, Hassie was shot multiple times just a block away from the courthouse. Police are pursuing one or possibly two suspects, which witnesses say were dressed in all black. Kaufman County Judge Bruce Wood offered remorse concerning Hassie, saying that he was not only an outstanding person, but he was also a very well-known and respected prosecutor for the district attorney's office. Investigators described the attack as targeted, and Judge Wood went on to say that whenever prosecutors are murdered like this, it takes things to the next level. A retaliatory sentiment which was also echoed by District Attorney Mark McClellan, who too seemed eager for his pound of flesh. There have been only 7 prosecutors murdered in the U.S. between the 1960s and 2004. $20,000 is being offered for information concerning the incident. In Chicago, Mayor Rahm Emanuel has ordered an increased police presence in some of that city's most violent neighborhoods. In just one night this week, there were 7 shootings, but it was the murder of a 15-year-old girl just a mile away from President Obama's home that sparked the latest crackdown. Hadia Pendleton was shot in the back on Tuesday as she and some of her friends gathered at a park on the way home from school. Police say the attack was targeted and carried out by a gunman who mistook them for gang members. A close friend of the family, however, and policeman himself, Damon Stewart, believes that it was simply a matter of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. To address the violence, a plan was announced this week to shift 200 officers from desk jobs to street duty in order to flood gang-infested areas with law enforcement. The mayor expressed grief for Hadia and urged the city to unify to protect its greatest resource, its children. But earlier this month, Mayor Emanuel admitted that it will take more than just flooding the streets of Chicago with law enforcement to stem the tide of the killing. Hadia Pendleton, the latest victim of that tide to receive popular attention, was a very promising young lady. She was opposed to gangs, and as early as the 6th grade, she produced a video encouraging her peers to do the same. Policeman Stewart says she appeared to be on the track to great things. The mayor has asked the community for help in solving her murder, and while police have received a number of tips, they have yet to make an arrest in the case. There was yet another shooting incident involving legal officials this week. 3 people were shot. One of them was killed. Another is listed in extremely critical condition, and the third received non-threatening injuries. One of the victims is attorney Mark Hummels, who was representing a client when he was shot. He is currently being treated at John C. Lincoln Hospital, where he is being identified as a no information patient, which simply means that either police or the family have asked the hospital not to release information concerning his condition. 6 people were taken to the hospital in total. 3 were shot, and the others were suffering from anxiety related to the shooting. Details concerning the case, just like the violence all across the country, is still unfolding. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
The violence is really increasing, Larry. Now, another disturbing event unfolding this week as a kindergarten student remains a hostage in an underground bunker in Midland City, Alabama. The suspect, 65-year-old Jimmy Lee Dykes, stormed onto a school bus, fatally shooting the bus driver, Mr. Charles Poland, as he tried to hold back the gunman while 21 children escaped out of the back of the bus.
The gunman grabbed 2 children, but one managed to break free. The kidnapped boy, only 5 years old, has now been identified as Ethan. Hostage negotiators have been communicating with Mr. Dykes through a 4-inch PVC pipe that runs down into the bunker, where Dykes remains with his 5-year-old captive.
The 6x8 bunker has both electricity and supplies. Police were able to deliver food and medication to the boy, who has special needs. Now, while there is no indication that the boy himself has been physically harmed, The mother has been described as hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Mr. Dykes has had a recent string of disturbing events. 6 months ago, he reportedly beat a neighbor's dog to death and terrorized other neighbors. A warrant filed last month accused Dykes of shooting at a man after he reportedly told Mr. Dykes that he needed to calm down. Rhonda Wilbers, a neighbor, said, "This guy is an accident waiting to happen. This guy is going to snap."
Now, from super confusion to super bugs, we are now learning this new strain of norovirus, which makes people violently ill, could be particularly vicious. Now, first identified in Australia, it's now spreading across the country. In an average year, about 21 million, and that's right, 21 million Americans will get the norovirus. Of those that get it, 800 will die.
Amazing. Symptoms include stomach sickness, which can come on very suddenly, even within hours of being exposed. With no one having immunity to this new strain, as many as 50% more of us could fall ill. Now, compared to the flu is normally spread mostly in the air by coughs and sneezes. A person needs to breathe in as many as 1,000 particles of the flu virus. Now, with this norovirus, just 18 particles can do it. It can make you sick, and it, of course, is extremely contagious.
Now, that means if a person touches the same spot that someone with the norovirus touched 2 weeks ago, the virus is now on their hands. That's right, on hard surfaces, revolving doors, door handles, coffee makers. Regular flu virus can last 2 to 8 hours, but the norovirus can be there and infectious for weeks.
Regular detergents don't work against norovirus. You have to use bleach, which of course is a live product. You need to get norovirus off your hands before it gets into your stomach by washing your hands frequently and wiping store products down with disinfectants.
Now, in other news, there has been an explosion in Ankara, Turkey's capital, just outside the U.S. Embassy. There has been no official press release at this point, and what we've learned so far is that a suicide bomber struck the embassy. Now, the explosion happened in front of one of the gates for the visa applications. One person has been confirmed dead until now, but many others were transported to the local hospitals.
Continuing in and around the Great River Euphrates, Syria claims that Israel has carried out a deadly bombing raid on its territory, destroying a military research center near Damascus. Israel denies these claims, but if confirmed, it'll be the first time in decades that Israel has launched an attack on another state, not in response to military action.
So far, Israel and most international powers are keeping silent on the matter, which has sparked condemnation from Russia. Moscow has commented on the matter, saying that the strike was unprovoked and is a strike on the sovereign state, and that, they say, is in violation of international law and is therefore unacceptable.
According to Syrian resources, 2 site workers were killed in the bombing. There are also some reports suggesting that Israeli fighters also bombed a convoy of weapons that were making their way from Syria to Lebanon, allegedly to arm Hezbollah, which, of course, the Syrians have also denied.
According to an American official, Tel Aviv had informed Washington that it was planning on an attack inside of Syria. Now, some think these actions will consolidate fighters in Syria to come together to fight against Israel. Again, Israel has declined to comment on the matter.
Back to the United States. In Georgia, a rare winter tornado touched down. According to witnesses, for 20 minutes, the twister wreaked havoc, turning over cars and semis, tearing to pieces houses, office building, and sending debris hurtling through the air. Now, scientists think it was an EF2 or greater with wind speeds more than 125 miles per hour. One person, of course, is reported dead.
Now, in its wake, streets and highways look like junkyards with over 100 cars flipped and strewn across the roadways. Now, one truck driver was in his truck when it was overturned by the tornado's violent winds.
Recently in our nation's capital, Mark Mattioli, one of the fathers of the victims of the school shooting that took place 2 months ago in Newtown, Connecticut, addressed Congress concerning solutions to gun violence. He stated the solutions to deal with gun violence is not as complex as others have been told, and although the solution might not be as simple to implement, it's a simple concept.
He continued that we need civility across our nation and that the shooting at the school were just symptoms of a bigger problem, and the problem is not gun laws. He went on to give one example of how the violence on television and movies when he was a child pales in comparison to the violence on television today. He gave an example of how when he was young, he stole a pack of gum from a store, and his mother, when she found out, took him back to the store, made him give the pack of gum back to the store clerk, and made him apologize.
Mr. Mattioli continued saying, "We as parents are the ones responsible for cultivating," and these are his words, "cultivating character in our children. And although we look to the schools to help us in this, it's our primary responsibility as parents." He's right, it starts at home. Now, more complex laws aren't needed. He cited that Chicago has some of the toughest gun laws on the books, but those laws did not protect the 500 or so people that were murdered last year in that city alone.
Now, he finished up by saying that we need to hold people accountable for their actions and enforce the laws that are already in existence instead of enacting more new laws.
Now, as we close out this news segment, North Korea is back in the news again, with continued threats that they will soon test a nuclear weapon and a long-range rocket aimed directly at, you guessed it, United States of America. As we've recently reported, North Korea's missiles can reach Hawaii, but they haven't been able to make a nuclear warhead small enough to fit atop a missile.
Now, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said that the U.S. is ready to meet any provocation. North Korea also threatened South Korea, saying that there will be consequences if they take place in backing the U.S. in sanctions against North Korea.
North Korea has reportedly turned its back on restarting six-party talks and appears to be following in his father's footsteps. China, one of North Korea's allies, has urged them to go back to the negotiating table and has said that it will reduce food aid to North Korea if it carries out another test. Of course, hopes are looming that this will motivate North Korea to withhold future tests. Of course, time will tell.
Well, don't forget to order your copies of the latest Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. You can contact the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Or you can email them at info@yahweh.com. Or visit their website at www.yahweh.com or www.yisraelhawkins.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Now, like we've said in the past, don't go anywhere. Press pause if you need to, but don't miss what's coming up next. Yisrael Hawkins revealing things scholars have been drooling over for centuries to understand, made plain and simple by Anoki, who unfolds the truth like no other. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.
Everyone please stand. The greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins!
Shalom, everyone! You're looking great and still cheering. Wonderful. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh, yes, I agree. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. While the world is practicing war and going to war, as they say now, we're practicing coming to perfection and showing Yahweh we're willing to. This going for the gold, you really need to get your orders in. Get them in quickly. What this is going to do on that night, it's going to show unity, complete unity to Yahweh. That's it. Yep. I'll show you that, prove it to you in Scripture. Not today, before the feast, I hope. But don't wait. Don't let anything stop you. Didn't ask you to do anything but get your orders in. They got to know your size. They got to know your whatever it is they're taking on that list. But get it in and get ready for that night. I want everybody to pay close attention to this. Now, Trumpets 2013, that's September the 7th, 2013. Tabernacles begins the 21st of September 2013. Atonement is the 16th of September 2013. The numbers that our forefathers used in Israel were not the same as the Roman year. I know all of you know that. The details of that is in Yahweh's calendar of events. That book is still available to anyone who wants it. It shows the feast and shows what they mean. Shows in fact, the meaning of the end, the beginning and the end is in that book. But the number that our forefathers used from creation or from Adam is right now 2013. It won't begin until the Feast of Trumpets 2013, but the year is 5774. If you want to look that up in Strong's, you will find the following. It means, the root word for this number is cover. Cover. Now that should take you over to Colossians, right? And that book, Yahweh's calendar of events, if you want to turn to Colossians 2, that book, Yahweh's calendar of events, it actually shows, as David said, and of course as Romans, there's where you get your warning. And there's where you're protected from things to come. But here in Colossians now, 2 and verse 16, I've covered this before, but now we're approaching the year and the year's meaning here. That's the reason I want you to see it. I want you to see it clearly and I understand the closeness of this right now. Where we are at this time, because that don't mean the wars are going to hold back. It doesn't mean the famine is going to hold back. The droughts, that it doesn't curb them at all. The lack of wheat this year because of drought. I've got several articles on that, but it's showing that it's put a pretty big bite out of the wheat crops. But here the apostle was inspired to write, "Therefore let no man condemn you for doing these things, eating and drinking in the observance of a feast day, or of a new moon, or of the Sabbath day." Now, of course, Christianity takes this and tries to make out like the feast were done away with. But you can't, there's no way you can. He's telling you, don't let them condemn you for doing this. And what they were doing, what the apostles were doing, was keeping the feast days, the Sabbath days, the new moons. Isaiah 66 says, from one new moon to another, one feast day to another, one new moon, one feast day, one Sabbath day to another, all flesh will appear before me throughout all eternity. That is all that's left alive. It's Isaiah 66. Now notice verse 17, which are a shadow from things to come, a shadow from things to come, for the body of Messiah. Now, as you know, the King James put of things, but of course the experts on the Hebrew and Greek language say, not so, should be but, which are a shadow from things to come, for, not but for the body of Messiah. Let no man deprive you of your reward. A reward comes with this keeping the feast. Reward, actually doing it on purpose, but as though in humility of mind, through a religious worship of gods, intruding into things they do not know nor understand, being puffed up in their own carnal minds. Satan came up with this thing again the other day that I guess they were puffed up in their carnal minds, said, the word Seder is not even in the scriptures. And boy, how ignorant, I showed that just a couple of years ago when Satan stuck her ugly tongue out. And it's kind of like Jubilee year, You can't find it under Jubilee year, but it's there. And here's where these people fall short. First off, they're not getting any message from heaven. Secondly, they won't study their scriptures long enough. The psychiatrists say, and this is probably a winner too, they say when a person reads an article negatively, they look for negativity. And when they find a piece of negativity, the mind dwells on that, even though they go on reading, and they miss the positive part because their mind is still dwelling on the negative. They keep reading in their mind, but they're not getting a thing. They're still back here on the negative. Not only is the word Seder found in both Old and New, or Book 1 and Book 2, it's a commandment. But they haven't got sense enough, they're not spiritually minded enough to even go to the place where they can get the information. So how could they possibly come up with things like this with their own studies? They can't. They're too busy dwelling on, let's destroy the house of Yahweh. let's take their inheritance. Well, anyway, I may show that again. David is wanting to. But he gets too rough with these people, and I may do it and try to soften it some. But they don't know nor understand, being puffed up in their own carnal minds. And that's what the apostles were dealing with too. And not holding firmly to the head, which means they have to go through the one sent to get to the head. And they're not going to do that. You won't come to me that you might be saved, as Yeshua said. Speaking of those puffed up in their own head, they're a legend in their own mind, as someone said. From whom all the body nourished, or is nourished now, and that's what is taking place with this going for the gold. I can hardly wait to get into all these scriptures on this. But nourished and come to unity. You see that? United as joints and ligaments of the body. They have to be united or you can't walk. If your nose is saying to you, this stinks, and your tongue is saying, put it in my mouth, it's going to get something done to your body that you don't want, right? Well, that's what it's talking about. Look on down to verse 5, 3 and verse 5. Therefore put to death the evil passions lurking in your members. And of course this means members of the body. And this is what you need to do now. Put to death these things if you want to be a part of Yahweh's kingdom and come to unity with Yahweh's last days work called the branch, the lamps that is symbolized in the start, in the beginning, and now in the end, named Abel, which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, unholy desires, passions, greed, covetousness, everything that breaks Yahweh's laws. Well, now, go back up here again, and notice again here, he said in verse 17, which are a shadow from things to come. Now, you got to remember what he says here, and let's go over to Psalms 91. I know you're familiar with that too, but I want to tie this year in. This year. It's number 5774. It will begin at the Feast of Trumpets, 2013. Feast of Trumpets. And the meaning of it, the first meaning is cover. Cover. In Psalms 91, he says, he who dwells in the shadow, in the secret place of the Most High, will abide under the shadow. Under the shadow, covered from these things to come. Shadow of the Almighty. They're the Almighty's feast days. So therefore, they are his shadow from things to come. The second meaning is with wings. With wings. W-I-N-G-S. Verse 2 says, Psalms 91 verse 2, we say to Yahweh, you are our refuge and our fortress. You are our Father, in you we will trust. I said a long time ago you wouldn't be here. They were going to destroy us, and you know this, and they would have the same time that they destroyed the Branch Davidians. Satan thought that word branch meant Davidians. That's how stupid you can get when your mind is screwed up with hatred. Branch, Davidian. Hey, that's the branch. Let's go destroy that sucker. You could see her laughing. She's not laughing anymore. She's got that same frown back on her face again. Now remember, it means wings. The words 5774 means wings. Surely he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome, deadly pestilence. That's disease epidemics, which, if you noticed, we got them, and they're getting stronger all the time. He will cover you with his feathers. You get that? His feathers, and under his wings, are you tying this together with the destruction that is coming? And the year 5774. Under his wings will you trust? His truth will be your shield and your buckler. This word in Strong's dictionary, it says to cover with wings or obscurity, by implication, dimness, from the darkness. The darkness, look at this now. Look at verse 5. You will not be afraid of the terror of night, nor the arrows that fly by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness. from the disease epidemics. If you remember the Revelations 18, he says, "Come out from her, my people, so you don't partake of her sins, and so you don't receive of her plagues." Now we're talking about this year, 5774 and the meaning. So he's going to cover you with his wings and protect you. You won't be afraid of the wars by day, nor the pestilence, the disease epidemics that walk in darkness, nor the destruction, that is, they can't be seen. They were saying on this Nora flu epidemic that we're having, a person can be feeling like running and flying one minute, and the next minute they can't stop vomiting, and coming from other directions too. Destruction that waste at noonday. This is the disease epidemics. 1,000 will fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. It will not come near you if you will get rid of fornication, adultery, and so forth that we just covered in Colossians 3. Come on, David. But it will not come near you. Verse 8, "Only with your eyes you will look, and you will see the reward of the wicked." Wicked, of course, because wicked, if you remember in Daniel, none of the wicked will understand. And wicked are those who refuse to keep Yahweh's law. And Daniel 12 said plainly, at that time, in the time of the two witnesses, none of the wicked's going to understand. That's why you have to seek Yahweh's place. Seek the one sent at Yahweh's place where he chooses to place his name. There's no other place on earth. It's a house of Yahweh. Always has been. From the beginning. Abel, from the beginning. We covered that last week. How many caught that last week? Beginning, from the beginning. Everybody? Okay. "Only with your eyes now you will look, and you will see the reward of the wicked, because you have made Yahweh your refuge, made the Most High your house." That's the house of Yahweh. "No evil will befall you, nor will any plague." Remember Revelations 18. "Nor will any plague come near your dwelling." Near your dwelling now. The house of Yahweh is your dwelling. Look at verse 14. Let's see. Well, let's look at 11. "For he will give his messengers charge concerning you to keep you in all your ways." That's what I'm trying to do right now and bring you to total perfection. That's what the team that Yahweh has put together here is trying to do. The team of priests and priestess and deaconess, that's what they're trying to do. They watch out for your eternal life. Watch out, guard your soul, as Yahweh said. Look at 13. "You will tread upon the lion and the adder, the young lion and the dragon you will trample under feet." Yahweh says, because you have set your love upon me, that's Exodus 20 verse 6, love Yahweh. That's the first and greatest commandment, Yeshua said. Love Yahweh. You have to repent, then be converted before you can start seeing. That's part of seeing Yahweh and how magnificent this being is, how loving and kind and merciful he is. But love me, I will deliver you, cause you to escape. I will set you on high because you know my name. You know what his name stands for. You must repent. Those who name the name of Yahweh, the apostle said, must put away all wickedness, all evil. That is to be a part of his family. Revelations 3:7, I think. You will call me, and I will answer you. I will be with you in trouble. I will deliver you and honor you with long life, yes, even eternal life. Well, the rest of this now, if you get that. Number 5774, to cover with wings from darkness, from swooning. That's the dictionary. This word means more than what the so-called lovers. It means unconscious, and that's the way it's been in this meaning here. Unconscious of what goes on around you. It means deprived, not aware. The unconscious psychoanalyst, the sum of all thoughts, totally keeping you obscure from what's going on around you. You're totally oblivious to it. And that's the way the world stands today. But the Feast of Trumpets is when this year begins, 2013. Feast of Trumpets. I want everyone in unity, Yahweh willing, Passover, Seder night. And yes, they should have kept their mouths shut, and then you wouldn't know. But they didn't. They opened it, accused the House of Yahweh. I'd like to place a bet in front of them. I'd like to put up, say, $100,000 and let them match it, and winner take all. If you put your money where your mouth is now, and show us how much you believe that. I know. Where we left off last week was in Samuel, of course, and that's where we were, 2 Samuel 11, and we were seeing how the house of Yahweh, how to seek an answer, even in the beginning too. It wasn't years later before they got the laws and the prophets, but the laws was given in the beginning, and of course Abel was the righteous priest that taught those laws. Now, of course, Cain didn't accept it, and as our great deacon just brought out, all the world has gone the way of Cain, and of course they're still going at it. For 6,000 years now, they've learned nothing but war, going the way of Cain. Now we come to a time when they're, of course, killing children, killing adults too. They plan on doing these things. The psychologists say they plan this event, and it's totally taken over their mind. So it's like the word swooning. It totally takes over the thoughts to where the person can't think of anything else for any length of time till this pops back in his mind, and he's dwelling on it again, day and night, and even dreaming of it, they say, dreaming of killing people or killing children. Now, this is a sickness that we're facing in today's world. And they're hunting for answers. They don't have any. We found out that this word in 2 Samuel, long ago, it says they They used to speak long ago, or King James Version, want to speak long ago. That means in the beginning. They, in the beginning, meaning command. It wasn't just a speak, but they were commanded to keep the law. In the beginning, brought to them by Abel at the house of Yahweh. There's never been any other name for that work except house of Yahweh, and Yahweh chose the place, then he prophesied that place. Now, in Deuteronomy 31:19, he said and Brown and Driver says that's what that word means in 2 Samuel. At Abel, it meant that's where they got the law, the perfect law. And now, with that, I want you to go over to Zechariah now. We'll just start this because we're out of time. Those other guys took up all my time today. But I tell you, it was well worth it. That news today and what man is striving for, that's the only thing he's striving for, is a war. And of course, fulfilling lust, which everyone has. Some will put it down and make it into the kingdom, others will not, but those who do will shine as the stars of heaven. For brightness, Yahweh says, they'll be glorified. He's going to glorify you like, you can't imagine the glory that you will have at that time and the beautiful life that you're going to have in the kingdom of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. In Zechariah, the 5th chapter, and the 5th verse here, we see, "Then the messenger who was speaking with me came forward and said to me, Lift up your eyes now and understand that which is sent by commandment." By commandment. I bet the people are scratching their heads saying, "Oh, that's not in there." And their minds will dwell on that, and they'll miss all the rest of this sermon. They're going to dwell on that because they couldn't find it in the King James Version, couldn't find it in Strong's Concordance, like the word Seder. They can't find it. It's there. It's there. And we'll show you. I may let David show you. I don't know. He's begging me to, but it's only in about 150 places, but they'll never find it. Because none of the wicked will understand. And until you turn from your wickedness, repent, seek the place that Yahweh, where he places his name in the last days by prophecy. Seek that place, and there they will teach you. And then you won't be opening your mouth and making yourself an idiot in front of all these people and getting your foot in your mouth and getting the foot and mouth disease, as they call it, to where it affects your brain so you can't never get over it then because of your hatred. I didn't intend to get back on that, but here we go. By commandment. This is going out by commandment. If you remember Amos, Amos, hold your place there and just flip back to Amos 3. Amos 3, and know this and believe it. Verse 7, most assuredly, it can't be any other way. Most assuredly, Father Yahweh will have no work other than the work which he has prophesied in advance by his servants, the prophets. Yes, it's mixed up a little in the King James Version, but you can still get the meaning if you just look. Look at Yochanan, the Savior's writings, in chapter 6 and verse 29. When Yeshua was asked, what is the work of Yahweh? And he says, Yeshua said, he answered and said to them, this is the work of Yahweh, that you believe in him whom he has sent. And without this, you're wicked And unless you turn from this wickedness and repent, you will never understand this. You'll never have any understanding from Yahweh. And of course, the next one is 63 of the same chapter that said, it is the Spirit which gives life. The flesh is useless. The laws that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. Now, as we get back into this sermon in Zechariah, in Zechariah, and remember what we just read there now, it goes out by command. Let me show you something before we end, that by command. Look at Isaiah 44, and you're going to see this command written loud and clear in the work that Yahweh has prophesied. Isaiah 44. Isaiah 44. And notice verse 7. Isaiah 44 and verse 7. Now, he names two brothers here in this chapter. He names two brothers, and then he says in verse 7, and who as I will foretell. One of these is named Israel, and the other is named Jacob. And Yahweh says, who as I will foretell and set it in order for me. Then he tells you, since I appointed the ancient people and things which are coming, since I, Yahweh, appointed the ancient people, like Abel, he appointed Abel to build a house of Yahweh, remember, where he brought the laws. And he said, since I've done this, the things which are coming and will come, let them foretell them. Speaking of these brothers, is that not a command? Do you surely you're not so dense that you can't, that you've got to have, now I command you this. Surely not. You know, there was only 10 commandments, but there's 613 laws that Yahweh commands you to observe and love. This is a commandment. Let them foretell them. Let no other. Now here's two. Now turn over to Revelations, because here's another question that they're saying, that they're coming up with. I know that you know this, but I got to get it to them. Revelations 11, here's two again, two witnesses, showing you in the last days they're the same witnesses that are prophesied in Isaiah 44. The two brothers, you are my witnesses. And he gives the names. He prophesies the names and says, I will have no other work except that I prophesy. And since I prophesied that in advance, long ago, with Abel, and the things that are to come, I'm telling you now, I'm commanding these two to do what I tell them to do. In other words. And then in the last days, Revelation, speaking of the last days, he says, and there was given unto me a reed like a rod, a measuring rod, and the Moloch stood, saying, rise and measure the temple. If you'll kind of watch and look closely, it's not like another messenger, but a future person is saying this. And he's prophesying that a future person will say this. He's speaking in advance, as the prophet wrote, as if it was already done. So when he's saying to this messenger, he's actually saying to the one that said it, like he told Yahshua. Yahshua said things, and he said, this comes straight from Yahweh. Of course, they were too dense to understand that it was prophesied before Yahshua ever said it. So that's what you see here. and, of Yahweh and the altar and its confines. We have a model of that. Who did that? An angel from heaven came and did that one night when we were all sleeping. Baloney. Now, we could probably preach that, and they'd probably believe it. And they'd want to examine this wood to see how old it was. Like they did that scarf that was x-rayed. Okay, verse 2. But the court which is outside the temple, leave out, measure it not, for it is given unto the nations, and the holy city they will tread underfoot for 42 moons. Well, it gives you a time period now. He's given you a time period of 42 moons. And then he explains that. And I will give to my 2 witnesses. I'll give it to my 2 witnesses only. My 2. What 2 is he talking about? It plainly tells you in the next verse here, but they won't go back to Isaiah 44 where it was actually prophesied. You still with me now? And I will give to my 2 witnesses. What 2 witnesses? Well, surely you can say, well, I'm that witness, or you're that witness, or Tom Joe down here across the creek is that witness. You can say anybody's the witness. But if you can't prove it by the prophecies, they're not the witnesses. I will have no work other than that I have already foretold in advance. And since I foretold this, let these 2 do the rest of it. I'll give to my 2 witnesses their prophetic office. Now, you'll understand this more as we get back into how Yahweh actually does this, and he shows it in how he actually gives authority and gives power, brings about certain events to take place in order to open doors and so forth. He's the one that does it. From the prophetic office, and they will, notice, a witness to perform their prophesied office. It's a prophesied office that they are performing, a prophesied work. You see that in verse 3. I will give them to do this work. I'll supply them with what they need to do the work I've prophesied. And they will foretell. What did the Isaiah say? Let them foretell them. Let them, the 2 brothers, foretell these events about the 1,260 days, those cast about with darkness. Now notice carefully verse 4. These are, as it were, the 2 olive trees. What 2 olive trees? Well, you've got to be smart enough now, and apparently they're not, or they would go back to the prophets and look for these prophecies in the prophets' work. Then they couldn't find it then because it's not in Strong's. They looked in Strong's. They didn't look deep enough or they would have found it. No, they wouldn't have found it. None of the wicked will understand. These are, as it were, the 2 olive trees, and as it were, the 2 lampstands. Now notice there's still 2 now. Ministering for the Father of the earth. Now how do you switch that over and there becomes 1 instead of 2? Well, apparently it had to be prophesied somewhere in the Holy Scriptures or it wouldn't go from 2 to 1. And that's exactly what it does. My time is up. Hey. Now the cooks are already looking at me mean. We got a delicious dinner that they don't want anyone to miss here today. They've already told me this one is so outstanding that they want everybody to get a taste of it while it's hot. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you!